The family behind the silo. When I was 19, I took a summer job repairing storm damage on an old dairy farm, never knowing the place had a reputation locals refused to talk about. On my first day, I noticed the rusted silo behind the barn, towering like a grave marker, its metal warped, as if something inside had once pushed outward. The owner, a thin, quiet man named Roland, told me to ignore the silo entirely, saying it was off-limits for everyone, especially strangers. His family lived in the house beside it, 3 pale figures who watched me through curtained windows, never waving, never blinking long enough to seem natural. One evening, while hauling debris, I heard giggling near the silo, high-pitched and childlike, though Roland had told me he had no children. The laughter stopped abruptly when I stepped closer, replaced by a low humming vibrating through the metal walls, like insects trapped in a jar. Roland shouted at me from the porch to stay away, his voice cracking with a fear that seemed older than the farm itself. I tried to forget it, but each night I felt eyes following me as I crossed the yard, something studying me from behind the warped metal. Roland's family grew stranger by the day. They moved in synchronized, slow patterns, shuffling from room to room like shadows, trying to imitate humans. Once, I caught a glimpse of one staring at me from the attic window, its face long and stretched, features slightly off-center, like clay molded too quickly. At dinner one night, Roland confessed the farm wasn't built for outsiders, saying it held history outsiders shouldn't carry home. The way he said it made goosebumps rise along my arms, as if he wasn't warning me about danger. He was warning me about transformation. Later that week, I heard scraping inside the silo, metal groaning as if something tall was dragging its limbs along the walls. I pressed my ear to the door and heard breathing thick and wet, followed by a whisper mimicking my own voice perfectly. I recoiled, stumbling back, and as I did, I caught movement at the top of a pale hand, retreating into the shadows near the broken roof hatch. I told Roland, but he begged me not to speak of it, whispering that recognition is the first invitation, something I didn't understand at the time. That night, I woke to someone standing at the foot of my bed in the workers' cabin, swaying slightly, watching me with glowing pale eyes. When I blinked, they were gone, but muddy footprints tracked from my bed to the door, long and narrow, with too many toes. The next morning, Roland's wife approached me for the first time, her voice trembling as she said, "Don't let it learn your shape." Before I could ask what she meant, she hurried away, her steps uneven, like she was fighting something inside her own bones. Curiosity finally dragged me back to the silo at dusk, when shadows stretched long and the air smelled of rain. Inside the cracks, I saw movement, something tall and thin pacing in circles, limbs bending in ways no human bodies should. It stopped and turned toward me, pressing its elongated face against the slit, its skin pale and translucent, revealing veins that pulsed rhythmically. It whispered my name in perfect imitation of my voice, followed by a series of soft giggles echoing through the metal chamber. I ran, stumbling through the dirt, feeling its laughter trail me like hands brushing the back of my neck. Roland caught me on the porch, eyes sunken, whispering that the creature learns every worker eventually, as if this was an unavoidable cycle. He said it was born from the family generations ago, a mistake they tried to bury, but its hunger for imitation grew with every passing year. That night, I heard 2 sets of footsteps outside my cabin, one human, one dragging slowly, patiently, as if waiting for my door to unlock itself. When I peered through the cracks, I saw my own silhouette standing beside Roland, matching my stance perfectly, except the limbs were slightly too long. It tilted its head at me, smiling with my own face, as if rehearsing a role it planned to wear permanently. I didn't pack my things. I ran into the fields until sunrise, not stopping even when something behind me laughed in my exact voice. Sometimes, I still hear footsteps outside my apartment at night, slow and dragging, as if something followed me home, still learning how to finish becoming me. The milkroom beneath the orchard. When I was 17, my uncle hired me to help harvest apples from his orchard, a place locals avoided because they claimed the land grew more than fruit. The orchard was beautiful on the surface, but the soil felt soft under my boots, almost sponge-like, as if something beneath shifted with each step. My uncle warned me never to enter the old milkroom beneath the barn, saying the family abandoned it decades ago after a wrong sort of growth took hold. The warning only raised questions, especially after I noticed thin white tendrils sprouting from the floorboards, curling like veins, searching for warmth. One evening, while stacking crates, I heard a wet sloshing beneath the barn, like someone stirring a bucket of thick liquid with bare hands. The sound echoed up through the boards, followed by a faint whimper that made the hairs on my neck rise. My uncle rushed in and stomped the floor until the noises stopped, his face pale and strained, as if silencing a child mid-tantrum. That night at dinner, he told me the milkroom was built by our ancestors to store dairy, but something bred itself in the dampness and refused to die. I barely slept, hearing faint tapping from the earth beneath my bed, each tap growing more deliberate, like knuckles learning rhythm. The next morning, I found pale growths winding up the apple trees, twisting around branches like fragile bones, pulsing slowly as if breathing. My uncle hacked them off with a machete, muttering that they'd spread faster if acknowledged too often, something I didn't understand then. When he left for town, curiosity dragged me back to the barn, where the floorboards felt warmer than the air, radiating a strange, milky heat. I spotted a hatch I hadn't noticed before, its hinges slick with a white residue that smelled faintly sweet and faintly rotten. Against every warning, I lifted it, revealing a narrow staircase coated in a waxy substance, like skin that had melted and rehardened. A soft, rhythmic sound pulsed from below, somewhere between a heartbeat and a churn, echoing in the sticky air. I descended halfway when something brushed my ankle, a thin tendril retracting quickly, leaving a damp streak on my skin. The milkroom opened into a cavern lined with fleshy walls, undulating gently, dripping with a pearlescent liquid that pooled on the floor. In the center sat a massive bulbous shape, throbbing like a distended organ, its surface covered in small mouths sipping from their own oozing sores. Each mouth whispered in tiny, breathy tones, a chorus of coos mimicking lullabies my grandmother used to hum. The creature quivered when it sensed me, stretching its tendrils outward, each lined with delicate teeth like newborn animals learning to feed. It tried to stand, though it had no legs, only a mass of muscle shifting beneath translucent membranes, revealing shapes suspended inside. One of those shapes moved, pressing a hand against the inner film, a hand disturbingly similar to mine in size and form. I stumbled back, slipping in the milky puddles as the creature's mouths began crying in high-pitched desperation, begging me not to leave. My uncle appeared in the doorway, dragging me away as the tendrils whipped upward, slapping against the stairs like frantic limbs. He slammed the hatch shut, bolting it with shaking hands, whispering apologies to the thing below as if it could hear him. Outside, he finally explained that the creature was a family remainder, something our bloodline accidentally cultivated generations ago when a sickness mixed with livestock rot. It grew by imitation, absorbing traits from anything that lingered too long near the soil, shaping itself into a grotesque echo of whoever tended the orchard. He said it had tried to become him once, and his father before him, each time growing a little closer to perfect resemblance. That night, I felt tapping beneath the floor again, but this time it tapped in the same rhythm as my heartbeat, matching it perfectly. I left the farm before sunrise, but months later, I received a crate of apples from my uncle, each fruit slightly misshapen, bulging as if something inside pressed toward the skin. Sometimes when I slice an apple open, I find a tiny, milky eye staring back, blinking slowly, learning me all over again. The family that ate the weather. My mother always claimed our family had a mouth for storms, which I thought was just a rural saying, until I turned 19 and saw what she kept hiding in the cellar. Our land sat in a valley famous for sudden weather shifts. The locals blamed my mother, whispering she fed thunder with something too close to hunger. Growing up, she warned me never to swallow rainwater, saying it carried memories of things buried before humans learned to speak properly. Sometimes at night, I'd hear her breathing heavily in the yard, gulping at the air as wind whipped around her like invisible ropes. On my birthday, the sky thundered even though no storm was forecast, and my mother said it was time to meet our other family. She led me to the cellar door, its hinges rusted by years of damp air that smelled like old iron and blooming mold. As she lifted the latch, warm gusts rose from below, carrying a faint moan that vibrated in the dirt walls like something trapped in the foundation. The cellar wasn't filled with tools or canned food, but swollen shapes hanging from the ceiling, their surfaces slick and pulsing like damp lungs. Each shape quivered as we stepped inside, expanding slightly, exhaling warm mist that tasted of metal and distant lightning. My mother stroked one gently, whispering that storms were born from abandoned emotions, and our family learned long ago how to feed them. She said these hanging bodies were old weathers, harvested during violent seasons, preserved so our bloodline could shape the valley's future. When I touched one, a sudden gust shot through me, filling my ears with distant screaming, like echoes trapped inside the storm's belly. My mother smiled, proud, explaining each weather contained memories of those lost during its forming, giving them a voice that never faded. I wanted to back out, but the cellar door slammed shut, locking us inside as the moist air thickened into swirling fog. The shapes throbbed harder, dripping warm condensation that collected in shallow bowls carved directly into the dirt floor. My mother drank from one bowl, her throat expanding as if swallowing something alive, then urged me to try. The liquid tasted like rain mixed with blood, and as it slid down my throat, I felt dozens of unknown emotions crawling under my skin. I heard faint whispers urging me to listen closer, followed by flashes of memories that didn't belong to me, faces distorted by wind, bodies twisted in lightning. My mother said our family wasn't cursed. We were caretakers, absorbing storms, so they didn't ravage the valley like they once did. But the more storms we consumed, the more our bodies changed, adapting to hold the pressure of things that should never live inside humans. In the swirling mist, I saw her jaw extend slightly, bones cracking subtly as new ridges formed along her cheeks. She said I would soon grow the same ridges, meant to anchor the pressure of contained thunder, preventing it from tearing through our skulls. As she spoke, one of the hanging weathers split open, spilling a gush of luminous vapor that wrapped around my legs like frantic limbs. The vapor crawled up my body, whispering in dozens of overlapping voices, begging me to release them into the sky again. But my mother forced me to hold still, insisting that letting a weather escape would bring devastation, worse than any storm the valley remembered. The vapor seeped into my mouth, filling me with a sudden cold rage that wasn't mine, bending my spine as if molding me to its pattern. My chest expanded painfully, my ribs creaking as the trapped storm made room for itself inside my lungs. I collapsed on the floor, breathing clouds of pale mist, each exhale echoing with distant thunder like a heartbeat I couldn't control. My mother held me tightly, whispering that our bodies were houses for forgotten weathers, destined to carry storms until they ate themselves quiet. As the cellar lights flickered, I realized the valley's calm weather wasn't luck. It was the cost of our family slowly becoming part of every storm we swallowed. Now, when the sky darkens suddenly, I feel something stirring inside my chest, eager to be released, tasting freedom through the cracks forming along my ribs. I'm afraid someday I'll open my mouth too wide, and the storm inside me will finally climb out, wearing my shape as it walks into the sky. The children of the root, The first time I stepped onto the old farm, the soil looked unnaturally soft, as if it had been kneaded by hands that never belonged to anyone alive. The family who lived there didn't greet me. They just watched from the porch, thin bodies slouched, eyes too wide, as if expecting me to dissolve into the earth. I was hired to help with the harvest, but the father warned me not to disturb the roots growing near the barn, calling them the children sleeping beneath. I laughed at first, thinking it was a joke, but the ground squelched unnaturally under my boots, and the air smelled faintly sweet and sour. That night, I saw small figures moving beneath the cracks in the floorboards, their pale faces pressing upward like seedlings trying to escape the soil. Their mouths were tiny slits, opening and closing as if breathing through the wood, whispering in a language I didn't know but understood somehow. I asked the mother about them, and she said the children were born from the roots, long before anyone remembered the harvest. Curiosity burned stronger than fear, so I knelt by the barn door, touching the soft earth, feeling something twitch and pulse under my fingertips. A sudden pressure lifted my hand, and I heard a wet, sucking sound as if something underground tried to pull me closer. The father appeared silently, dragging me backward, whispering that if the roots learned my shape, they would try to grow into me next season. That night, I dreamed of hands emerging from soil, fingers thin and knobby, pressing against my chest, trying to merge with my own flesh. I woke covered in dirt, my fingernails brown and brittle, though I had gone to bed clean and washed. During breakfast, the family didn't speak except for low humming, syncing with the rhythm of wind through the orchard, as if communicating with something invisible. I went to the barn again, ignoring the warnings, and found small mounds of dirt shifting with subtle motion, like tiny hearts beating beneath the surface. One mound split open, revealing a translucent hand curling upward, its skin stretched too tight, veins visible and pulsing, as if it had grown in a rush. The hand grasped at nothing, then retracted as I stumbled backward, tripping over roots that were slick with moisture, each knot throbbing with life. The mother appeared behind me, saying the roots remember everyone who touches the soil, and some people are invited to stay, whether they want to or not. I tried leaving, but the path out seemed to lengthen, the orchard twisting unnaturally, trapping me in a corridor of swaying, reaching trees. I felt something tug at my ankle, and when I looked down, a tiny root had wrapped around me, pulsing, searching for a way to climb. The father pried it loose, scolding me for touching the children, explaining they were fragments of ancestors, growing again after being buried too deep. I stayed inside the house, but faint scratching came from beneath the floorboards, following me from room to room, whispering in high-pitched tones. One of the figures finally emerged from the cellar, thin, pale, with hands that looked like twigs and eyes too large to be human. It mimicked me perfectly, repeating my every movement, my every hesitation, as if learning my shape for some future purpose. The mother said the children needed to learn, and the forest taught through imitation, slowly absorbing those who lingered too long. I wanted to leave, but the cellar hatch rattled, small thuds like footsteps echoing from below, warning me that leaving too fast might anger the roots. I watched as one child pressed against the hatch, its tiny hands moving like worms burrowing, its gaze fixed on me with uncanny understanding. The father whispered, "They learn fastest from fear," and I realized my own reactions were their lessons, shaping them in ways I couldn't undo. By the next morning, the orchard seemed quiet, but every tree leaned slightly toward the barn, roots curling under the surface like waiting hands. I left the farm as fast as I could, but sometimes in my dreams, I feel roots crawling along my skin, testing my shape, whispering my name. I know they wait for me to return, to grow into me, and I fear someday I'll feel myself sink into the soil willingly, unable to resist their slow, patient learning. The glass children of Hollow Creek. When I first arrived in Hollow Creek, the fog pressed against my skin like cold silk, and the locals whispered about children who reflected what you feared most. The house I was hired to clean sat at the edge of a cliff, glass panes cracked and fogged, as if the windows were sweating in fear themselves. Inside, the air was sharp, metallic, carrying a faint scent of wet clay and something that tasted faintly like sugar and bone. The first child I saw crouched by the staircase, skin translucent like glass, its limbs bending at impossible angles as if gravity avoided them. It didn't speak, only tilted its head and mirrored my expression, blinking in perfect, eerie sync with my own eyes. The parents appeared silently, thin and angular, voices raspy, murmuring that the children learn empathy through reflection. But the tone felt more like warning than guidance. Each room I entered seemed to pulse subtly, walls bending slightly inward, as if the house itself was breathing alongside the glass children. I tried dusting the shelves, but every surface was covered in tiny scratches, forming abstract faces, each one staring outward with hollow glass eyes. In the attic, dozens of mirrors leaned against the walls, warped reflections trembling as if anticipating my next movement. When I looked into them, I saw the children not behind me, but inside the glass, pressing faces and fingers to the surface as if trapped in another dimension. One child pressed its palm to the largest mirror, and I felt a pressure push back, as if it was trying to communicate directly into my chest. The mother whispered that the mirrors teach patience, but I felt something more sinister. The children were learning me, every gesture and tremor recorded. I tripped going down the stairs, and the children laughed without sound, their faces bending, stretching along the walls in impossible ways. I felt my own reflection distort in the hall mirror, subtle at first, then grotesque, lips too wide, eyes too big, fingers fused together. The father appeared behind me, murmuring that the reflections were the children's eyes, and if I looked too long, they might step through. At night, I woke to the sound of glass scratching against glass, small figures crawling across the windows, imitating my own movements in silence. I tried leaving, but the doors resisted, swelling as if the house itself rejected my exit. One mirror cracked, and the glass child inside reached through, tiny fingers grazing my shoulder, leaving a faint chill and a whisper that sounded exactly like me. I felt my chest tighten, as if the air itself wanted to learn the shape of my lungs. The children multiplied in the mirrors overnight, each reflection slightly different, their expressions testing, learning, absorbing every nuance of my panic. The parents watched silently, smiling thinly, mouths stretching unnaturally, their teeth reflecting light like shards of silver in the candle flames. I ran down the hall, mirrors lining the walls, each reflection echoing my movement, making it impossible to tell where the house ended and I began. One mirror leaned forward, crack widening slightly, and I felt a tug on my mind, pulling memories and fears into the tiny, hollow forms inside. I covered my face, but the children mimicked my panic, their reflections pressing outward, hands fused to the surface, lips stretching silently in eerie mockery. The fog outside turned thick, curling under the door, carrying whispers of laughter and cries from other mirrors scattered across the valley. By dawn, the mirrors appeared empty, but when I turned on the main floor, I saw dozens of tiny silhouettes etched into the glass, imprints of the children's forms. I fled the house, but at every reflective surface in town windows, puddles, shiny metal, I see them again, pressing faces to the other side, learning me. Now, even in my apartment, when the lights go out, I feel the faint pressure of tiny hands pressing from inside every mirror, waiting for me to look too long. Sometimes I think if I blink, one will step through, carrying my own face, perfect and hollow, into its glass world. And I know that if I ever go back, I won't just see them, I'll become one of them, pressed against the glass, trapped in silent imitation for eternity.